The Sinai. This is what happiness looks like to me. Professional Association of Diving Instructors, PADI. (1993). Outdoor activities were crucial in our relationship, serving as the glue that kept us together and providing a means for me to surf the deep emotions through play and fun. Erik and I enjoyed activities like diving, weekend hiking escapades, and lively games of racquetball, which Israelis called madkot, on the beach at sunset. I discovered diving in the Sinai for the first time with Erik. Diving gave me a profound sense of peace. Everything went quiet in my mind, and I could float along without feeling my body and just enjoy a completely new environment that didn't require me to talk or communicate. The Sinai Peninsula belonged to Egypt and was the only part of the country located in Asia. It was mostly inhabited by Bedouins, Arab nomads who lived in the desert. They wore long white tunics that covered their arms and legs, black sandals, and headcloths loosely wrapped around their heads, at times very haphazardly. Traditionally, they lived in tents and moved with their herds across the arid lands looking for good grazing for their sheep and goats. They were well known for their hospitality and honest congeniality. We packed up the car with camping and scuba gear and got into his old Volkswagen Golf and headed south. We were never sure if the gas stations on the Egyptian side would have any gas, and we were driving almost to the bottom of the Sinai, where the Gulf of Aqaba met the Red Sea. So we made sure to have extra gasoline in a tank in the trunk of the car. Sharm el-Sheikh was known for its world-class diving. We drove through the night to beat the line at the border. We picked up Erik's friend along the way. We planned to meet the rest of the group in Eilat. Israel had occupied the Sinai from 1967 to 1982, but since it was returned to Egypt, we had to do a border crossing to get there. We arrived in Eilat early and waited on the beach for the rest of our group before crossing the border together. By the time the others showed up, a long line of cars had already formed, all waiting to cross into Egypt. Dahab was a popular weekend getaway from Israel, known for its relaxed pace and stunning underwater scenery. After being awake all night, I was exhausted and irritable when the group finally reached the meeting point. So much for my afternoon dive, I thought. We queued up to present our paperwork and undergo inspections at the border. The Egyptian guards, dressed in khaki uniforms with shirts half tucked, looked indifferent as they processed the line, which moved at a snail's pace. Behind their desks, I noticed the metal cots where they slept. With a nonchalant glance, they stamped our passports. Getting the car across required additional forms, and we had to wait for one of the guards to slowly make his way outside. I sighed inwardly, wondering if he was deliberately conserving as much energy as possible. "What is with you guys?" Erik scolded us as he drove away from the border. "What?" we answered in unison. "Didn't you see that you left the marijuana joint on the dashboard?" he responded emphatically. I almost had a heart attack. "Well, the guard was half asleep, and I don't think he could see anything if he tried," I answered sheepishly. I guess that was the upside to their lack of interest. "Well, we got through all right, but I want you to be more careful the next time," Erik said, relieved. I felt better once we got on the road and started moving toward our destination. We drove up winding roads to a plateau at an altitude of nearly 1,000 meters. The breathtaking mountainous views of arid land and ancient rock formations soothed my soul. After driving along the plateau for a while, the road began to slope downward toward the Red Sea, where we passed the coastal plains with sand dunes as we approached the coast. 2.5 hours later, we turned off the main paved road onto a dirt road to get to our campsite on an undeveloped beach called Ras Nasrani. We set up our tents for the next 3 days, and I geared up with Erik to get into the water before dark. We had brought our own tanks so that we would be ready to jump in on arrival. I could always count on Erik to get in that extra dive despite the slow group dynamics. The sun was setting as we got ready. Erik helped me put my tank on my back and then swooped his up in one movement. We got our fins, masks, and lights and headed toward the water. I grimaced as I struggled to navigate the jagged rocks, which was the only access to the water. Once we were floating on the surface, we put our masks on to have a look below. There were colorful fish everywhere. The bottom of the sea was limitless. We descended and leveled off at 20 meters. The reef continued down into a dark abyss. Erik and I liked to dive between 20 and 30 meters. At that level, the water was cool and the visibility was clear. Underwater communication was mostly through hand signals, though some divers carried whiteboards and pencils to write messages. Commercial divers often used this method for detailed communication, but Erik had a different approach. He liked to write jokes. He would wave at me furiously, then scribble something on his board, eager for a reaction. I usually tried to stay focused, immersing myself in the tranquility of the underwater world, but one time I couldn't ignore him. He spun his hand in a circle and jabbed his thumb behind him. I stared blankly, unsure of what he meant, until he turned his board around. "Woman, get into the kitchen and do the dishes." Annoyed, I rolled my eyes. "Really? 20 meters below the surface, and this is what you want to say?" I turned my back on him, trying to regain the peaceful connection with the sea, while secretly smiling behind my regulator. He knew exactly how to push my buttons, even underwater. My focus returned to the beauty around me as we swam gently along the fringing reef. At that depth, the reef took on a greenish-blue haze. The underwater world opened up in all its glory. Black coral branched out in hard, intricate formations, while vibrant bouquets of fan-shaped coral swayed gently in the currents, creating a stunning underwater garden. The sounds of parrotfish echoed through the water as they gnawed on coral, breaking off chunks in their search for seaweed. Brain corals, appropriately named, looked like intricate gray matter, while soft sea whips and fans undulated with the flow of the water, and I found their movements hypnotic. Orange clownfish darted around their anemones, disappearing inside when we got too close. I had to stay mindful of the fire coral, its sting a painful reminder to master my buoyancy, hovering just above the reef to avoid contact. Crabs and shrimp scurried along seeking refuge in crevices as we passed, while large schools of fish moved in synchronized patterns around us, like clouds shifting through the water. A mass of Napoleon wrasse glided by, curiously eyeing us as it approached, likely hoping for a handout. Divers often fed these fish boiled eggs. Whether that was good for them, I didn't know at the time, but the Napoleon seemed happy enough. Tiny worms and snails lived in symbiosis with the coral, while a crab slowly lumbered along, camouflaged by a piece of coral it carried on its back to blend in with the reef. Moray eels in their various hues peeked out from holes in the coral, their gaping mouths a warning to predators. We caught sight of a giant green moray gliding gracefully along the reef, its smooth body cutting through the water with a sense of authority. We floated, mesmerized, as the blue sea stretched out into the unknown, vast and endless. We emerged from the water just as the sun had dropped below the horizon, and hues of orange and pink painted the sky. We could smell the aroma of Arabic coffee, and our friends welcomed us by the campfire. The tranquility of the sea, with its rhythmic waves lapping against the rocky shore, caressed me and gently erased the feelings of frustration that had clouded my mind earlier in the day. The salty breeze enveloped me in a sense of peace and contentment, while laughter and chatter filled the air.